6:27 p.m. The 16th of August, 1958. The corner of Lenox Avenue and 128th, Harlem, where the heat hangs low and the street smells like roasted nuts, bus exhaust, and somebody's cologne trying too hard. A boy came sprinting out of the crowd like a secret had grown legs. He was skinny, maybe 13, shirt half untucked, eyes wide with a kind of panic that doesn't belong to kids. Behind him, two men moved wrong, too steady, too patient, not running, but closing the distance like they had all night to finish a sentence. The boy looked over his shoulder once, then he looked forward and saw Bumpy Johnson standing by the newspaper stand, calm as a church door, and the boy ran straight at him. Freeze that, because the boy wasn't running toward safety. He was running toward a roomer with shoes, and the question isn't will Bumpy save the kid. The question is, what does a neighborhood do when it realizes a child is being hunted and the system won't admit it? But that wasn't the end, because what Bumpy did next didn't just hide a boy. It made Harlem choose a side, and once Harlem chooses, even professionals start walking careful. Now, listen. This is a fictionalized, dramatized street, legend retelling with grounded context, not a claim of strict history. We're keeping it responsible. No instructions for wrongdoing, no glamorizing harm. This is about principle, pressure, and how community becomes a shield. Bumpy's real power wasn't a weapon, it was access to people who knew things, to institutions that hated being watched, to a street network that could move faster than any official system when it decided to. The city doesn't run on rules, it runs on favors. And tonight, a favor was about to get called in on a child. The boy's name was Tommy. Tin Rivers, Tin, because he was small and tough, looking from a distance, but close up you could see he was still soft around the eyes. His tell was the way he kept rubbing his thumb against his palm like he was trying to erase his own fingerprints. Bumpy noticed that before he noticed anything else. The two men behind him weren't cops. They didn't have the stiff confidence of badges. They had the quiet discipline of people who didn't want witnesses. The on-scene enforcer in this story was a man named Dutch Ramirez. Heavy shoulders, soft shoes, toothpick in the corner of his mouth, like punctuation. His tell was he always said the same phrase right before a room got colder. You heard me. Dutch had two younger shadows with him. No names, no personality, just presence. Because Dutch didn't need helpers for muscle. He needed helpers for control. The institutional face villain was Captain Wallace Dre. Precinct commander, clean uniform, dirty patience. His tell was tapping the top button of his shirt twice when he lied. Tap, tap. Just doing our job, Dre would say, like the job was innocent. And the shadow villain, the one who made plans feel like policy, was Conrad Vale. Thin hands, smooth voice, gold cigarette case. He clicked open and shut, even when he didn't smoke. His tell was the same line, soft as velvet and sharp as wire. Let's keep things quiet. Vale would murmur, that's the triangle. Dre kept the cops busy. Vale kept the politics clean. Dutch kept the street obedient. And the boy was a loose end. Because Tin had seen something he wasn't supposed to see. Not a shooting, not anything we're going to map out. Just a meeting, a handoff, a brown envelope, exchanged under a street lamp, behind a storefront that was supposed to be closed. And the man receiving the envelope wore a city-issued coat. Paper can kill you in this town, and Tin had accidentally watched paper change hands. That's why he was running. Tin hit the curb in front of Bumpy, like a wave hitting a rock. He didn't stop politely. He collided, grabbed Bumpy's sleeve, eyes pleading without words. Please, Tin gasped. Please. Bumpy didn't flinch. He looked past the boy's shoulder and saw Dutch approaching with that toothpick smile. Dutch slowed down as he got close. Like he didn't want to spook the crowd. He glanced at the boy, then at Bumpy, then back at the boy. You heard me, Dutch murmured. Soft. Tin froze like the words were a hand on his neck. Dutch smiled politely, like he was asking for a borrowed pen. Kid belongs with us, Dutch said. Bumpy's voice stayed calm. What kid? Bumpy asked. Dutch's smile didn't move, but his eyes did. The one holding your sleeve, Dutch said. Bumpy looked down at Tin like he'd just noticed him. Then he looked back up at Dutch. He's holding my sleeve, Bumpy said. That makes him a customer. Dutch's toothpick shifted. This ain't your business, Dutch said, still soft. Bumpy nodded once, polite. Everything on this block is my business, Bumpy replied. The crowd on the sidewalk started listening without turning their heads. A fruit vendor's knife stopped mid-slice. A woman with grocery bags slowed her steps. A man at the barber shop door leaned out, pretending to smoke. They didn't realize one thing. Harlem's listening is louder than Harlem's talking. Dutch's voice stayed polite, but it tightened. You heard me, he repeated. Hand him over. Bumpy smiled slightly. Not warmth, not softness. Principal. He turned his head toward the newspaper. Stand owner, Mr. Pasha, who always acted like he didn't see anything, and somehow saw everything. Pasha, Bumpy said calmly, you got a back door? Pasha's eyes flicked once to Dutch, then back to Bumpy. He nodded without speaking. Bumpy looked at Tin. Go with him, Bumpy said. Tin's eyes widened. Now, Bumpy said softly. Tin moved. Pasha opened the stand door like he was letting someone out, not in. And Tin slipped behind it. Dutch took one step forward. Eddie Glass, former cop, contact, tired eyes, appeared from nowhere near the curb. His tell was always the same. He looked bored, which made dangerous men nervous. He stood in Dutch's path, not touching him, just occupying air. Evening, Eddie said. Dutch's toothpick paused. Move, Dutch murmured. Eddie shrugged. I'm standing. Dutch's eyes narrowed, then slid to Bumpy. This is a mistake, Dutch said. Bumpy's voice stayed low. No, Bumpy said. This is a choice. Freeze that, because right there, on a crowded sidewalk, Bumpy chose. Not to be soft. To be consistent. And consistency is what neighborhoods trust. Hauer won. Word traveled faster than the boy ran. It didn't travel like gossip. It traveled like a warning. A barbershop man leaned out and said quietly to a customer, Don't touch him. A woman on the stoop whispered to her cousin, Bumpy got him. A runner ducked into a pool hall and murmured, Tin Rivers is under the block. By the time Dutch walked away, toothpick still in place, half the avenue already knew, Harlem had chosen a side. And the side wasn't the one the hunters expected. Tin was hidden in Miss Odessa's apartment above a beauty shop that smelled like hair oil, hot combs, and money kept quiet. Miss Odessa sat him down at her kitchen table, like she was feeding him into a new life. Her eyes didn't blink. Baby, she said, you know what you did? Tin's hands shook, thumb rubbing palm. I didn't do nothing, he whispered. I just saw. Odessa held up a finger. Don't tell me, she said. Tell me if you can keep your mouth shut. Seaton swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Odessa nodded once. That's the first smart thing you said, she replied. Bumpy stood by the window, watching the street below, like it was a living map. Ruthie Caldwell arrived a few minutes later, breathless, ink-stained finger, notepad tucked away. This is going to get loud, Ruthie whispered. Bumpy's voice stayed calm. Not if we make it official, he said. Ruthie frowned. Official how? Bumpy turned from the window. Paper, he said. Paper can kill you in this town, but paper can also protect you if you put it in the right hands at the right time. And that's where the countdown started. 72 hours, Bumpy said softly. Ruthie blinked. For what? Bumpy looked at Tin, then at Ruthie, then at Eddie. For them to stop hunting, Bumpy said. Or for them to get exposed doing it. Leon Vega, runner, young, jittery, entered last, eyes wide, knee bouncing like it was trying to escape his body. "They're saying Dutch is mad," Leon whispered. Eddie nodded. "Dutch gets mad quietly." Bumpy's eyes stayed steady. "Then we stay quieter," Bumpy said. Minute 3. Tin flinched at every sound. A car door, a shout outside. The radiator clank. Odessa slid him a glass of water. "Drink," she ordered. Tin took a sip, hands trembling. Odessa's voice softened. "Just a hair. Baby," she said. "A boy who runs with fear can still outrun shame if he stops in time." Tin blinked, confused. Bumpy spoke gently, but firm. "You saw something," Bumpy said. "You don't need to tell me every detail. Just tell me the one name you recognized." Tin swallowed. "The captain." Eddie's eyes tightened. "Dre." Tin nodded quickly. "Captain Dre." Ruthie's pen scratched silently in her mind. Bumpy didn't react big, he just nodded. "That's enough," Bumpy said. "Har 12. The proof object had to be something Captain Dre couldn't laugh off. Not Tin's story, not Harlem's whispers. An internal memo, contract clause plus a directive, that showed modernization inspections were being aimed like a weapon, tied to payoffs. Exactly one object. And it needed a signature feature that would burn into memory. Eddie knew where such paper slept. City Housing Modernization Board's records room. A place that smelled like damp cardboard and tired secrets. Ruthie knew how to apply public pressure once the paper surfaced. Miss Odessa knew how to make witnesses appear without calling them witnesses. Leon knew how to run messages fast enough to outrun fear. The plan was sharp, but one thing threatened it. Leon's nerves. He was young. He wanted to be useful. He also wanted to stay alive, and that's how betrayal sneaks in, through the desire to survive. Har 18. Eddie and Leon approached the Modernization Board building just before closing, when clerks were hungry and supervisors were impatient. The lobby smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. A security guard eyed them with boredom. Eddie flashed a calm smile and a story about missing documents. They didn't break in. They slipped through routine. But complication 1 arrived fast. A man in a suit leaned against the far wall, gold cigarette case clicking open and shut. Conrad Vale. His smile was polite enough to be poison. "Let's keep things quiet," Vale said softly, as Eddie passed. Eddie didn't stop walking. "We are." Vale's eyes flicked to Leon. Leon's knee bounced. Vale stepped closer, voice warm. "You're Leon," Vale murmured. "You're young. You don't need to drown with old men." Leon swallowed. Vale continued gentle. "Give me the boy, and you get money, a job. You get out." That was the fracture moment. On screen, Leon's eyes darted. He looked at Eddie. He looked at Vale's clean suit. He thought about Tin hiding upstairs, shaking. He thought about Dutch's toothpick. His mouth opened. "I could," Leon started. Eddie's head snapped toward him, not angry, dead serious. "Leon," Eddie said low, "don't sell a child to buy comfort." Leon's throat tightened. Vale smiled wider. "It's just business." Miss Odessa's voice wasn't there, but her proverb should have been tattooed on the wall. A man who sells a kid sells his own tomorrow. Leon's eyes filled with shame. "No," Leon said, voice shaking. "No deal." Vale's smile disappeared like it was never real. Complication 2 hit immediately. 2 uniformed men entered from a side hall. Captain Dre's men, not building security. One of them spotted Eddie and stiffened. "Hey," the officer said. "What are you doing back here?" Eddie's voice stayed flat. "Looking for paperwork." The officer smirked. Paperwork don't look for you. Leon clutched his bag tighter. Vale clicked his cigarette case again. Let's keep things quiet, he murmured. Eddie leaned slightly toward the officer. You want quiet? Eddie said. Then don't make me ask loud why precinct cops are babysitting a housing board. The officer's smirk faltered. Because that would create a witness, and institutions hate witnesses. Eddie and Leon moved into the records room anyway. Rows of file cabinets dust, a single buzzing light. Leon's hands trembled as he pulled drawers. Eddie found it. A contract clause, stapled to an internal memo. Stamped in red at the top, priority clearance. Chambers only, and there it was. Signature at the bottom. Captain Wallace Dre. The memory hook. A cigarette burned through Dre's printed name. A dark hole punched right through the ink, like the paper had been punished. Leon whispered, That's him. Eddie nodded. That's enough. But as they turned to leave, the door swung open. Dirty cops. One officer stepped in, hand raised, not to strike, just to block. Give me the file, he said. Leon's breath caught. Eddie didn't move fast. He moved certain. He held up the memo so the red stamp and the cigarette burn were visible. You touch this, Eddie said quietly, and you're touching a stamped directive with your captain's name on it. The officer's eyes flicked to the stamp. Then to Vale in the hallway. Vale's face was calm, but his eyes tightened. Because now the paper wasn't just evidence, it was liability. Eddie and Leon slipped out with the file folded inside Leon's coat like a heartbeat. Har 30, back at Odessa's kitchen table, Tin watched Bumpy lay the memo flat. The red stamp screamed. The cigarette burn through Dre's name looked like a wound. Ruthie's eyes widened. This is it, Ruthie whispered. Eddie nodded. This links housing inspections to precinct enforcement. Miss Odessa sipped her tea. Baby, that's a leash. Tin's thumb still rubbed his palm. Am I safe? Tin whispered. Bumpy looked at him gently. Not because you're invisible, Bumpy said, because you're chosen. Tin blinked. Chosen by who? Bumpy nodded toward the window, where Harlem's streetlights glowed like watchful eyes. By the block, Bumpy said. Day 2. The hunters reacted the way hunters do when prey becomes protected. They tried to isolate. Dutch Ramirez showed up at Savoy de Lis midday, toothpick in place, smiling like a man with manners. He slid into the booth across from Bumpy without asking. You heard me, Dutch murmured. Give me the kid. Bumpy didn't flinch. He stirred his coffee slowly, fluorescent buzz overhead. No, Bumpy said. Dutch's smile tightened. You know what this turns into, Dutch said softly. Bumpy looked up, eyes calm. It turns into you leaving, Bumpy replied. Dutch's toothpick paused. He leaned in closer, voice low, posturing. You think a neighborhood can stop a contract? Bumpy's voice stayed soft, slower, meaner. I don't need to stop your contract, Bumpy said. I need to make it expensive. Dutch's eyes narrowed. How? Bumpy placed the memo on the table, not pushing it toward Dutch, just letting the red stamp and cigarette burn be seen. Dutch didn't touch it. He didn't want fingerprints. Bumpy's voice stayed calm. Paper can kill you in this town, Bumpy said, and this paper got your friends' names on it. Dutch's toothpick shifted. You bluffing, Dutch whispered. Bumpy smiled slightly. Then touch it, Bumpy said. Dutch didn't. Silence stretched. Then Dutch stood up, smooth, and backed away like he wasn't backing away. You heard me, he murmured. But now it sounded like he was reminding himself. He left the deli, and the deli exhaled. That was the quiet win. Control over shouting. Day 3. The institutional showdown came at a place that hated drama but lived on it. A union board hearing, not court, not precinct. A meeting room with folding chairs, a coffee pot that never tasted fresh, and men in suits pretending they didn't sweat. Ruthie brought her editor. Eddie brought a former colleague who hated Dre more than he feared him. Miss Odessa brought community leaders who didn't need invitations. Bumpy walked in calm. Captain Dre sat at the front, uniform perfect, tapping his top button twice. Tap, tap. "Just doing our job," Dre said before anyone spoke. Conrad Vale sat beside him. Cigarette case clicking open and shut. "Let's keep things quiet," Vale murmured, and Dutch Ramirez stood by the door, toothpick in place, watching faces. "You heard me," Dutch whispered, barely audible. Ruthie stood and set the memo on the table. Red stamp up cigarette, burn through Dre's name visible. Freeze that, because the room reacted like it had been slapped with bureaucracy. A board member's coffee spilled onto his notes. A chairman's gavel, small, decorative, hit the block wrong and clacked sideways. Vale's cigarette case snapped shut too hard. Dutch's toothpick dropped to the floor and rolled. No big speech, just a few lines. Ruthie's voice was sharp. "This directive ties housing inspections to precinct enforcement." Iddy added, calm, signed by Captain Dre. Burn mark through his name. Same copy from the records room. Dre's smile tightened. Button tap stalling. Tap. Nothing. "Forgery," Dre snapped. Bumpy spoke softly. "Then explain the stamp." Val leaned in. Smooth. "Let's be practical. This is an internal draft." Ruthie cut in. "Drafts don't get stamped, chambers only." The room went silent in that special way, when process becomes shame, when shame becomes pressure. The board chair cleared his throat, voice trembling. "We'll be opening an inquiry," he said, effective immediately. Dre's jaw flexed. Vale's cigarette case clicked again. Too fast. Dutch stood still. Toothpick gone. Eyes colder. They resisted with threats. They resisted with delays. They tried to seize the memo, but Ruthie had copies made with witnesses present. Eddie had corroboration from the former colleague. Miss Odessa had community pressure calls, appearances, murmurs that turned into attendance. They yielded not because they wanted to, because the room had witnesses, and witnesses make systems behave. Aftermath came fast and punchy. Captain Dre wasn't arrested in our telling. He was reassigned. Administrative leave pending review. Which is what they call a man when they want him silent without admitting he's guilty. Conrad Vale's access got colder. Phones stopped answering. Meetings got postponed. People who smiled yesterday suddenly had conflicts. Dutch Ramirez didn't get defeated in a fight. He got denied. Harlem stopped treating him like inevitability. And for a man like Dutch, that's poison. Tin Rivers. Tin didn't become a hero. He became protected. The block didn't cheer. It just adjusted. A barber gave him a haircut for free. A bodega owner slipped him an extra sandwich without speaking. A church lady walked him to school like it was normal. Harlem became a shield, and the team paid the cost, because protection has a bill. Ruthie got followed for a week. Eddie's shop got inspected twice in 3 days. Miss Odessa got an audit letter stamped urgent. Leon got a friendly talk from a patrolman about staying out of grown folks' business. Tin's aunt received an eviction notice. Suddenly, magically, suspiciously, Bumpy held the notice in his hand and didn't blink, because this is where the story turns morally complex. They protected the boy, and the system tried to punish the act of protection. Justice and revenge share the same street. They just wear different coats. Bumpy visited Tin that night quietly. On Odessa's stoop, Tin sat with his knees pulled up, thumb still rubbing his palm. "Why'd you do it?" Tin whispered. "You don't even know me." Bumpy sat beside him, calm. "I know the pattern," Bumpy said. Tin stared. "What pattern?" Bumpy's voice was low. "Men hunting kids," he said. "Men hiding behind paper. Men calling it job." Tin swallowed. "So what happens to me now?" Bumpy looked out at the block. Streetlights humming. People moving like they belong to each other. "Now," Bumpy said, "you learn the difference between being afraid and being owned." Tin blinked. "What's the difference?" Bumpy answered with a proverb. Simple and barbershop. Clean. Fear passes. Ownership sticks. Tin nodded slowly. Bumpy added another. Softer. A neighborhood don't save you with fists. It saves you with agreement. And then Bumpy delivered the moral line. Clean and quotable. The kind that sticks to the ribs. A community becomes a shield the moment it decides a child is not a bargaining chip. He let that sit, then added one more sentence. Quieter. Heavier. If you want to know who runs a city, watch who it protects when nobody's paid to care. So, if that image stays with you, the kid sprinting through Harlem, Dutch's toothpick stopping, the red stamped memo with the burn hole through a captain's name, hit like and subscribe, because these stories aren't about glorifying danger. They're about how people survive it. And tell me in the comments, was Bumpy acting out of justice, or was he protecting Harlem's reputation the only way he knew how? Next story, don't miss it, because a pastor gets handed a donation receipt. That's actually a trap, and the only way out is one phone log stamped house eyes, only that makes the whole room go silent.